Good morning.
Hello, Dwayne.
Hi. A neighbor, I should say.
Yeah,
Hi, how are you?
good. Nice to have you join us. Is this the first one you've gone to here?
Yeah, I've been on the emails for quite a while, so
Okay,
this is the first time I'm actually attending.
good, great. Welcome. My name is Maria Barnes, and I'm the chapter president of Access Lunchtime. Welcome to 2024 session. This is the first meeting of the year.
I'm looking forward to this presentation.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining us. Please do put yourself on mute if you're not specifically asking a question. You can also feel free to ask questions in the chat. I will try to monitor that. That's not always easy, but I have a couple of helpers that will no doubt interrupt and stop me if I get off on some kind of tangent and don't see something urgent in the chat. Today, we are going to talk about 2024 plans for access, and I'm taking that as kind of a general term. So you'll see that I'm covering a couple different topics in this meeting, and hopefully there'll be a little something for everybody here. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the access engineering priorities that they've published. At one point, they were doing this in the Access blog on the tech community. This year, they did not, or the most recent copy of this, which is this screen showing here, they did not publish on that blog. However, a site called AccessForever.org, which if you're not familiar with, I would suggest you do get familiar with, did publish this at the permission of the Access engineering team. And this slide was a slide shared with the public at a user conference over in Vienna, I believe, this fall by the Access team. And then Carl Donabauer was given permission to post this to everyone else, so that this is a copy of that, direct from the Access engineering team. So there are 6 priorities that they outlined to cover in the 6 months from October to March of this year. And I've noted that 2 of them, priority 2 and 3, have been completed at this point. You know, we're several months into that time range, so this is good progress. And the bottom 4, 5, and 6 still have not been released, but that doesn't mean that the team's not working on those items. The first priority is, and has been, and I'm sure will continue to be, to continue to focus on monthly issues and fixes. We are going to talk more about those monthly fixes in a couple other slides here, but they have indeed been doing that, and that's kind of an ongoing priority. So that is not something that was, released in a specific version per se, but gets released over several different versions. The second priority was that Access has now become large address aware, and there is various posts about that fix. The large address aware is something that is of particular interest for those that are still using Access 32-bit or Office 32-bit. Back in the days when Access was first started, the memory address limitation was much more severe than it is today, even for 32-bit address. And so this fix allows Access to use more memory that's available on some of the newer machines than it was as well. So yes, it's only of interest for 32-bit Office users. If you've already got 64-bit, then that new feature is not something that's of interest to you. But if you do still use 32-bit address, it can allow you to do more things and run into less access memory limitations. It's the easiest way to, I think, phrase that topic. And then there's also been some Dataverse export improvements. I actually did some testing both in 2022, 2023, and 2024. The majority of the improvements at this point seem to be for large tables and for the initial export up into Dataverse. And the speeds from 2022 for that process to 2023 about halved. So we got about, double the improvement, and it about halved again from 23 to 2024. There's still a lot to do with Dataverse, maintaining connections from within an application and moving around, updating or inserting records once you're in the application and already have your data in Dataverse. There's a long way really that we need to go on that. That is coming. We will definitely be able to, hopefully take advantage of that method of having our back-end data more in the future. A couple other of the priorities that I think are pretty interesting. Large monitor support for forms. Oh my, it's way past time for that, right? Almost all of our monitors are much wider than what we've got capabilities for with, I think it's around 22 inches right now for the current limitations of a form, but it's going to have hopefully much larger monitor support in the near future. They're working on some modern chart improvements, and I don't really know a lot of details about what. This is kind of vague. Expanded support for most popular chart types and options. I do know that there's some limitations, for example, in VBA and what you can do, and just some of the settings for charts that we're used to setting that the modern charts can't handle. So I'm expecting some additions in that area. And then SQL Editor improvements. And for the everyday user, that might not mean very much, but for us super users, I think we're going to really see some nice things there. Let me go to a couple links here. This is the link here to accessforever.org, and there is links to this, the site itself, in the end of this particular presentation here. I also have a link on here in our AccessUsersGroups.org. You can log in, you can go to the member dashboard under Lunchtime. You can switch groups here like this if you're not on the Lunchtime. And today's presentation is here, 2024 Plans for Access. Let me go ahead and copy a link to that in the chat. Thank you, Eric, for posting the accessforever.org. So this is the PDF of today's presentation, my slide deck. This is the posting here where I got this diagram for. Access Forever, by the way, it's a great site. It's relatively new, maybe a year and a half old, something like that. There's about 6 people that maintain blogs on this channel. We have a couple of them here in our group, or today. There's several of us that post on this. Most of us are MVPs, and there's one that's a retired MVP. We try to post here about bugs, about new features, about findings that we have, and various tools and different events. So it's a nice site. Kind of, Microsoft's trying, but they have very limited resources. And their main tool is this Access blog on the tech community, which there's also a link to at the end of the presentation. And this is where we get a lot of the bug fixes and that kind of stuff. And some blogs about new features and stuff like that. But if you can't find it here, I think you're going to find probably a more thorough list here on Access Forever. They do have more information about large address aware. So I did see some questions here, which I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer. I saw one about how you could tell if you were large address aware or not. Let me see if I can find that to verify that we have it active in our installations. There is a version number, so it would be, I know it's Office 365 version 2310 or beyond, and I think there's some more information in here about specifically here also 2021, 2019, and the 2016 CTR, except for the long-term servicing channel or volumeless license that only gets security fixes. So hopefully that will answer your question, George. And Colin has already answered it separately. Okay, so we can take that at the end if we have any more information about that you have questions. Okay, so those are our 6 priorities. 2 of them are already in there. One's ongoing. The other 3 are still being worked on. There is a list here of some highlights of some recently released bug fixes. The bug fixes themselves, there's a couple good sources for those. One is the Tech Community blog, which I've posted the link to here. And also there's a link at the end of this presentation. That's one good source. There's also in the Access Forever, there's some lists by year, and I'm going to post some links to that. This is the 2024 list. And then it's the same thing with 3 at the end for all of the ones that were fixed in 2023. It's a whole list of them. And then different ones of us have written articles about specific fixes, kind of a more important nature, and that we know people have been complaining about on forums and that kind of stuff. And I've listed here the 2308, 10, 12. Those are version numbers of Office 365 where those fixes were fixed in. So roughly the version number corresponds to the year. So these were all fixed in 23, and the month that the bug was introduced into the earliest channel, which I think is typically the beta channel. So 2308, that doesn't go to like current channel until I think typically a couple months later. And it does, I think, depend upon the actual fix and, if they find problems in the earlier version and that kind of stuff. But Access Forever has blogs on all of these. There was a missing semicolon in an ODBC connection string issue. There were some issues if you had Windows 11 with a combo box not auto-expanding. The navigation pane, shutter bar, if you're familiar with that, and maybe we get a good picture of that in here. There we go. We had this bit for a while where when you minimized the navigation, you got this odd characters over here that looked really weird instead of saying navigation. So that's been fixed. Did you want to say something, Colin?
I was just telling you it was that article, but you found it as I did
so. Yep. The same article that I was just showing, there's some information about the font display bugs. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about one of the new features in one of the next slides, but I believe that most of those display bugs were related to issues with Office upgrading or changing their default fonts to supposedly make them something that's better for accessibility. And that happened around that same time, and then immediately we found some display bugs that they then fixed that were related to that change on a wider Office level. And then finally, there was some improvements in the newer Edge web browser. There were several instances and reasons where it would crash during the build event, and those were fixed. And again, there's another post for that. Here's some highlights of some newer features that were recently released that weren't on that plan of 6 items. Fixed and regressed. Yes, that does happen sometimes, Neil. And it crashes in 2012. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I think we are aware of that. Access is part of a wider Office system, and so we do definitely have issues which look like they appeared to be fixed, and then suddenly something else causes them to reappear. Sometimes we think we have all instances of it fixed, and there are some instances where it's not, and so there's several different levels where that happens. New features that were not on that 6-item plan. You can now open queries directly in SQL view. That was released in 2311, that feature request. That was something, here is the Edge web browser control. This is the whole list of fixes in 2024 and 2023. Here's the SQL view. So what we mean by this is if you're looking at the navigation pane and you right-click on a query, you didn't used to have the option to open directly in SQL view, just design view or open. Now, sometimes when you clicked it in design view, it seemed to save the fact that last you were there in SQL view, but not all the time. And it just really depended. So now it's specifically on there on the right-click menu. It's very, very nice, kind of handy. So now you know it's there. Then there's also, as I mentioned before, this was something Microsoft introduced, a change in the default theme and font that came out with 2310. And they do have a nice write-up on the blog, Microsoft Access blog, about that. It highlights what the font is, some differentiation in it. Then there's a discussion about it and some links in there that are interesting, like this one about the process and how they made a decision to do that. It is supposed to only affect newly created items, not affect existing documents in databases that are already there, but I'm not sure that some of us haven't reported seeing something a bit different in that. Somebody mentioned that they have to drop off soon for another call. The recorded recap on this will be available about a week before next month's presentation. So it won't be available, directly after this, but we will get it out there so you can take a look. But you can also take a look right away at any of the rest of the actual presentation slides. Then there was also an annoying design view warning for linked tables. Now there's an option to not show that. And again, we've got a post about that. There's this don't show this message again option, because otherwise if you were doing a lot of looking, you would get this repetitively. It's a nice little touch, easy for the team to add without possibly affecting lots of other code. So it's nice that they cater to us sometimes. Okay, now we're going to move on and kind of switch gears. We've talked a little bit about new features, upcoming, what they're working on, recent bug fixes, where to go to keep up to date on bug fixes, new features, etc. Now we're going to talk about Access in 2024 and where to find more activities like today, like we're doing here in this free webinar. The first thing I've listed here are some in-person and virtual Access seminars. There is a one-day in-person conference scheduled in the Seattle, Washington area. in the middle of March, and that's called Access Day. It's something that has gone on for a while. It used to be in a lovely resort someplace, and that part of it's kind of fallen by the wayside, and it's more recently been in office building kind of scenario and just one day as opposed to like a whole weekend or something like that. And indeed, during COVID, it has been not happening, just too hard to get people in person. But it's back live this year. There is a link to it here on this slide. There's already an open registration link. I think it goes up to maybe 150 starting February 1st. And there's a link to the presenters, lists, and topics. I already have that open. There's, I believe, 7 presenters, many of whom are MVPs. And there's myself on there. Or ex-MVPs, retired MVPs, and the Access team will be there. There are a few of these topics that don't have their, full what they're going to do there. But most of these are filled out, and that will be improving. We don't know the order yet of this, but this is an all-day, it's a Friday in Redmond, Washington seminar. So one great option, especially if you're able to travel to Redmond and if you are excited to get back to an actual in-person event. There's also Access DevCon. That is a virtual seminar, and it's usually 2 days long. And the registration for that, well, here's the site. You can get links or information and stuff about the kind of things that happened in previous years. For the past maybe 3 years, it's been virtual, and you can subscribe to their mailing list. So last couple of years, there's been over 100 people attending that, and it's via Teams. So it's it's in English, although it has an international audience. So then these others I listed, and there are links, in the PDF that you can click. I'm not going to go to those other sites. This one is in Spanish, and it's in Spain. It is in person. They had one last year, and it was really a success. I think they had somewhere around 30 or so people live for that. There's also a live seminar that's in German that takes place in the fall in Germany. Again, I'm not going to show you that link directly, but it's here. If that's something that fits you, check that out. It's in the past, I think, had hundreds of developers there. I took German in high school and college, but I couldn't follow it, I'm sure. I'm not that good. I practice it or when I get like relatives' Christmas letters, and that's about it. I've also listed other Access user groups. I put this group first because this is what this presentation is about. This first slide is all AccessUserGroups.org presentations, and I've listed a little bit about when generally they meet. So there's different days of the week, different times of the day. We've listed here the UTC time. So if you're coming from, a different time zone than Central US or, whatever time zone this is designed for, you can more easily, convert that to know when it really is your time. There's one group, Access España, that's in Spanish. I've listed the leaders here. The one that Juan Soto does, the SQL Server with Access, that has a focus of pairing SQL Server and Access together. But most of the other ones, other than the specific language differentiation in Spanish, the topics are pretty broad and, just kind of rotate. And whatever time works for you. And then, of course, on the YouTube channel, there is recordings from all of these available. If you go to the AccessUserGroups.org, just the main site, I'm going to go off of lunch here. There's a login up here. If you're not already logged in, I already logged in, so it says log out. And then you can choose a group. And if you're not already a member of the group, when you choose that group, I believe it'll prompt you and ask if you want to join. And then if you say yes, you want to join that group, then the chapter president of that will approve that and get you added to an email distribution list so that you get notification about the times and stuff via email. Then, you can also go to the different dashboards. If you're already in one, it won't tell you and ask you to join. It'll give you this basic welcome. Oh yeah, there's a join today here, even though I'm already in it. Anyway, so yeah, it gives you more information and then you can click join. But if you are already a member, then you can actually go to this member dashboard and you can see more information. And again, you can switch groups right here to go between the different dashboards. And you can get like information about the upcoming events. You can get the files that we've shared, like past presentations. There's a direct link to the YouTube playlist and various recordings. And then there's a couple nice things on the site itself. This event calendar, you do have to watch it because this is European events. It's Monday through Sunday. So don't think you're clicking here and you're on Tuesday. But you get a month at a time list of all of the events for all of the groups so you can see what's going on, even if you're not a member of one of those groups. And then the other neat thing here is the SQL Converter, which is a tool. It's a free tool where you can convert and you can choose different SQL versions between Access SQL, like what you'd see in the SQL Query Editor, and T-SQL. And you can also get the same conversion in a VBA context, using the VBA window. So it's a really neat tool, free to anybody. You don't even have to be a member of the group in order to do so. To use that, it's free. The last slide before the wrap up is a list of some various other user groups that we know of. And this information was actually something that the Access Forever team put together. George Young, that's the other George I was talking about, not George Hepworth. And here, I got to say it right even. He runs a Denver area user group that's been active for a long time, and they've got monthly presentations on Thursdays. I presented at one of them once, I know. It's a little bit late for me and my liking, but works great for a lot of people. There's a UK Access user group that's very active, and they have a mixture of online and live events. And then there's some various user groups in Germany. Again, I'm not sure what the audience is today, but if you are in the area, most of those meet in person. However, I think there is this one here that's on Skype. So in general, those are more for, locals, but, we want you to be aware of all your different options. So that's really it. Here is the links to the AccessForever.org site and the Tech Community blog, my information. And now let's just open it up and see if anyone has any questions or comments that you did not get answered by someone in the chat. So feel free to come off mute, particularly if you want to ask a question, or type it in the chat and I'll be watching now.
I think you caught most of them when they were live, to be fair, Maria. I did see you reacting to a lot of them.
Well, it was flashing by on my right-hand side.
Well done for catching that. Anyone, please feel free to contradict me, but I think most of the ones that were raised have been answered one way or another, hopefully to everyone's satisfaction. I don't recall anything not being covered.
Welcome to the new people that have joined us. We hope you come back.
Yeah, so we do this once a month in this particular group. I was going to announce our February topic today. I'm open to topic suggestions. I'm open to guest speakers if anybody would like to speak. Generally, we try to speak for close to 50 minutes and then allow 10 minutes for questions and then wrap up fairly close to 1 hour. Since this is called lunchtime, we assume you don't have forever for lunch or dinner or however you're joining us. But sometimes we do go over and get, onto topics that we like to talk about and discussions even off topic. I would love to get people to share, even if it's for 15 minutes, an actual application and how they're using Access. I think we greatly benefit from that type of thing. You have to be careful. You can't show personal information or anything proprietary or something like that. But for example, some of the seminars that I've gone to, I've seen all kind of interesting. I saw one guy who had this huge TV in a doctor's office, and Access was running the display of where people were in an operating procedure. It was just so amazing, and how he brought different things together. Maybe your application's not that amazing, but sharing it with other people, I think, gives others ideas of what they can do. The product is huge. It's been around forever. It's got some wonderful things, but because it's so huge, even though people like me have been developing in it for close to 20 years, there's things I don't know. There's things I wouldn't have thought about. And so it's great to see that.
We were just talking about if any questions hadn't been answered. That hadn't quite finished. I don't know if Colin was going to say anything or if anyone else had anything to say on that, just so that we can tick that off and move on. We wouldn't want that to be missed.
Hello. I see we've got Philipp Stiefel here. I mentioned his LAA tool earlier. Philip, do you want to say anything more about that? In a way, it's redundant, partly redundant now, because if you have the latest version, it's automatically on. But if you want to find his tool, the article's very interesting. I gave the link earlier.
Well,
So, Philip,
if you don't have one of the versions that it's available in,
I was going to say there are some versions where it won't have rolled out yet. So it would be helpful for some people to... There is a link in the chat, so that's good. But Philip, I know Philip's around.
Yeah,
his
I see
microphone
him.
is on.
There we go. It's on now.
Yeah, okay, hi. I didn't join early enough and I completely missed Colin's presentation on LAA. So I can't really say anything on that. Well, I know Colin, I'm pretty sure he has told you everything you need to know.
I didn't present anything, Philip. I just gave the link to your wonderful utility, which I used for several years.
We also had a link, Philip, to the Access Forever article on the new feature and pointed that out. We didn't talk about it a lot other than to cover some of the versions that were in there. And I think there was a question about how you could confirm whether or not you had that capability, which Colin answered. Do you want to share that just on video too, so that we get that in the recording? Colin?
Sorry, I thought you were talking to Philip. Oh,
No?
right. I thought you were talking to Philip. What would you like me to say there, Maria?
So what did you post about how they could tell whether they had LAA enabled in their version?
Right.
A link
Philip
to Philip's tool.
Oh, to tell?
Right.
Yeah.
You've
Got
you've
it.
disabled screen sharing anyway, Maria, so I can't show my
Oh.
screen of either my article about it or Philip's earlier article about it. It does the job if you have an earlier version like 2010 or 2013 or anything like that, it will still work in those. You don't really need it in the later versions, but it's good to understand it. But as far as I know, there is no property that you can view in Access that will actually allow you to check that it's on. It's just, it is on if you've got a new version. Do you agree with that, Philippe?
Yes, I agree that you cannot see it in Access user interface, but I believe you can use my tool to check if LAA is enabled in your Access installation, because it's just a tiny bit that is set in the file header, and my tool can just read and display the result, or it can switch it over to the opposite state than it is now.
I did use it recently to turn off LAA temporarily so I could do some tests for an article I wrote. I'll then turn it back on again, obviously. It's a very, very useful hidden or background feature.
Well, and I definitely ran into several clients a year who would have some process and they were using a lot of data and they would run into the issues with the memory and just not a lot of options. There were several different things you could try, but I'm really hoping that this helps do away with a lot of those issues.
One of my clients who's got an application with forms upon forms upon forms upon forms, and he was running out of system resources.
Mm-hmm.
The application was such a mess. You know, it's one of these, a hobbyist database. And I told him to try 64-bit, and it got him out of a mess. So that was about 3 years ago, I think. That was the first time I actually recommended 64-bit, because it used to be the black sheep of the family. It made the difference. It did make a huge difference. So this LAA is really welcome. Probably just a little bit too late.
It's a good point that I don't know that it's too late, because we do have people that still are on 32-bit for various reasons, but 64-bit is definitely the move, and more people are putting that on. So that is something that if you haven't already taken a look at for your application, you're going to have to address it fairly soon, my guess is. I know I'm working on it in one of my clients. Right now I have 2 environments, and one of them's in 32-bit, and they wanted to move the other one to 64-bit, and I said, that means I have to compile my application twice every time we release. So can we hold and move everybody onto one environment first and then move to 64-bit? So anyway, yeah.
Generally speaking, there are certain things where it used to be ActiveX was discussed a lot. Not all ActiveX options are not available on 64, but
True.
I believe there are still some additions that you can't use if you're using 64-bit. There may be people that have enabled that to work better more recently, but generally speaking, without help, you can't run certain things in 64-bit. But I would say that's probably the only reason nowadays for not switching to 64-bit. Most people have got 64-bit Windows, so if you've got 64-bit Windows, 64-bit Office is a good way to go, and particularly specifically for Access, unless there are things that you can't do because what you need to do is not available in that version.
Yeah, I recently had a surprise because I converted an application over to 64-bit, and all of a sudden I got incompatible. And it was an older application. It got the old calendar control on it. Not the Access one, but the DLL one that someone released. And of course, I then spent a couple of hours going through the application, finding everywhere it was used and changing it to use the new picker, the new calendar feature.
Well, maybe you need to get Philip's amazing find and replace tool.
That's how I did it. That's why it only took me a couple of hours. His find and replace thing I haven't not used it for a day yet since I bought it about 4 months ago.
I'm amazed at how much I'm using it.
I used to use SpeedFerret, But that disappeared a long time ago with Access 2007. And in fact, for a year or two, I was converting to 2000 just so I could use SpeedFerret. But yeah, Philips is the first one that's actually been any good since SpeedFerret.
So does one of you or Philip want to put a link to that in the chat?
Go on, Philip. Bit of self-promotion. Go on. It's truly, it is a superb utility. He only charges about $50, I think, as well. 50.
Yeah, thank you very much for the praise, Crystal and Neil. Thank you very much. I'll put a link in the chat in a second. But who has not heard about Find and Replace? It's just a tool to help you find and replace stuff in the development environment, like form properties, report properties, properties in queries, and it basically just does search and replace, but I think we are one of the really, really rare tools that can cover all of Access properties. There are a couple of free or cheap alternatives around that do like 70, 80, or maybe even 90% of that, but none of those can really cover all the Access development environment. And it's blazing fast also. Yeah, okay, and that's all that I can say for now. The link
Let me say something else. I mean, in addition to changing all the names in your objects, it changes code and conditional formatting too. That was quite a surprise. It's just really, really a wonderful tool, especially for somebody like me that connects to people that are just starting with Access and they've just done things very poorly, named things very poorly. It's really, really a great way to get things on the right path.
Yeah, if you inherit code that hasn't used a naming convention and you've got to go and sort of rename things to give them sensible names, usually getting rid of spaces and keywords, it's brilliant because one of the things it will do is if you rename a control, it will actually rename the code behind the control as well. It is a good utility.
So just for clarity, I want to answer this one question first, and then I see John Clark, you have a question, so we'll go to you. Philips tool is a find and replace tool. It doesn't address 32-bit to 64-bit conversion itself, but would help you find the locations where you use one of those controls or something like that. One of the first steps most people do if they are using a 32-bit control is to contact the developer or the owner of that control to see if they have a 64-bit replacement. Some will. It was mentioned that there was some kind of a communication tool control that was being used. Some will, especially if it's like a product that you have, and others will not. You know, it just depends. So with that, and before Peter does his bit, because he does have more tools that have to do with the 32 to 64-bit conversion. John, did you have a question?
Yes, actually, Key Jacoby had one. I think you may have answered it. I was only half listening. Sorry, I'm usually not that rude. I'm usually much worse. But anyway, did you see the question? Is that the one you answered?
I'm not sure. Is that the question that I answered?
It is, will use serial communication ActiveX object to talk to you? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to answer. It might work. You might be able to install it on 64-bit, the 32-bit one, or it might not. So what I recommend is that people get a hold of whoever gave them the tool, you know, whether it's the product.
It's actually from
whatever,
Microsoft.
And ask if they have an updated 64-bit control.
There is another thing on that 64-bit subject. Now, Peter might be thrilled at this idea. But it's always been said that you can't run 32-bit Office and 64-bit Office on the same machine. Well, I've been doing it for the last couple of months. You can actually have a window of 32-bit Office and Access 32-bit, Access 64-bit next to each other on your screen.
Can I suggest we don't get on to us, because that's what Peter and stuff is going to be discussing. We were actually trying to look at this RS-232 thing that
and
that was sort of half in the middle of.
Jim does have a link. Jim, maybe you can post a link. You said you wrote an article on a Windows API control that could replace the serial COM control. So if you have a link to that, that would be awesome for those that have that specific question. Peter, do you want to do your bit now?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I'm still working on something which I did demonstrate to the UK Access User Group in November, which is a new scanning tool. I've had a scanning tool which has looked for declares for quite a while. I've got something now which does an awful lot more than looking for declares. It will look for all the references which are used, and it will look for the ActiveX controls. What I'm doing is I'm storing a list of ActiveX controls that I find, and then I'm hoping that other people will run the scanner and we can make a collection of known ActiveX controls which will work in 64-bit. So that we haven't got dozens or hundreds of Access developers searching out whether the ActiveX controls are available or not, so we can make that a lot simpler. My scanning tool will actually check for the declares, references. I'm working on looking at providers, because obviously a provider, you can have something which isn't going to work in 64-bit without updating it. So my tool will give you the information to say whether your database is going to run in 64-bit without any problems or what the problems would be. It's also listing declares which aren't terribly well known or in fact totally unknown in the 64-bit world. It's designed to work on either a single database or multiple databases. I'm working with somebody who's got 8,500 databases. Obviously, that's a massive task to look at individually. So I've now got it that it will scan a whole machine and check every Access database on there. That will obviously take a significant length of time, but it's only something that you'd need to do once, because once you've gathered the information, then you're okay. As Adrian tells me, I should get it finished. It is nearly finished. Having run the scan on my machine, it threw a couple of little idiosyncrasies, which I've now fixed. I'm just working on one at the moment. So next few days, and then I would hope that...
Yeah, Crystal did post a link to that. The link has Theme My Database in it.
That's the older version of the scanner, which can be downloaded. That's nowhere near as sophisticated. That will work happily on a single database. The whole point of the scanner is that is the thing that you would run before you use my updating tool, which actually updates the declares and all the calling code.
The link that I posted also has Peter's viewer, and the viewer allows you to look up declarations, API declarations, types, and constants, and see what they look like in VBA 7. So as long as you're on Access 2010 or above, you can use the VBA 7 code for almost all of them. I mean, nearly almost all of them. There's a few that just aren't 64-bit compatible, but Peter didn't mention that, and I think the viewer is a really wonderful tool as well, and I have it pinned to my taskbar. Thank you, Peter.
That's free.
It's very simple, and if you've got just a few, you don't need the whole big thing.
Okay.
I would say, it's pretty much been covered already, but even the viewer itself provides an awful amount, a large amount of value to, even its free viewer is really helpful, really useful stuff.
Sorry, forgot to add, the scanner is free as well. The updating tool, that's going to be a paid for item.
Well, if you have 8,000 databases, it's going to be well worth your money, I tell you that.
You're assuming he'll ever get to the point where he actually releases it and charges for it?
Yeah, I've heard almost done, a couple days, a few weeks, for more than a year now. But I will say, even if you just have one database and it has a bunch of calls, it's well worth it to get Peter's help. Even if he doesn't want to give you his tool, let him do it for you.
Anybody have any last minute questions or concerns here?
I would like to comment that since the meeting finished, we still have quite a large number of people hanging on interest. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
A good one, Maria.
Thank you all for joining, whether you're regulars or new and tried it out this time. We hope you continue to join us, at least periodically. The last, not the fourth, but the last Tuesday of every month, with a few exceptions, like if it falls next to a big holiday or something like that. Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's great to see you all. Join us next month. I'll let you know via email what the topic is, and hopefully I'll get it posted soon.
Very interesting.
Lots of very positive comments in the chat as well there, Maria.
Yeah, I see that. Thanks, everybody.
Cheerio. Bye.